Hi, it's Katrina. We are on the brink of bringing back all kinds of creatures from the prehistoric past. Today I'll be showing you some projects focusing on resurrecting the dodo bird, the woolly mammoth, dinosaurs, and even a creature from Game of Thrones. Are you ready for it?
Could the dodo make a comeback? In 2022, the genome of the dodo bird was sequenced from a small DNA sample. Now, in 2024,
a biotech company is working with conservationists to get a habitat ready.
the dodo bird is about to be reborn. It's wild, but it's true. Humanity is on the cusp of bringing back animals from the dead. They're not as zombies, hopefully. The process to de-extinct the dodo is already underway. The plan was announced in January 2023 by scientists at Colossal Biosciences in the United States. Now they've partnered with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation to restore the bird's original habitat. It's like the biotech company is shopping at the pet store for all the supplies they'll need when their baby dodo bird shows up. But just what happened to the dodo anyway? To be honest, it's not a very happy story. You already know that it ends in extinction. What I can say is that before the 16th century, the dodo bird lived in paradise. Imagine you're on a deserted island. There is nothing predatory to eat you, and the weather is always perfect. All of your best friends are around, and there is an endless buffet of your favorite food. Nobody is raiding your nest for eggs or trying to steal your feathers. It is the very definition of dodo paradise. This was the world the dodo bird enjoyed prior to European settlers arriving on Mauritius in the 16th century. Sailors started hunting the dodo bird for food. They stole eggs from its nest to eat. Within 100 years, European settlers had destroyed the dodo bird's natural habitat. In real time, they hunted the dodo until there wasn't a single one left. Paradise was lost. The dodo bird became the face of humans causing animals to go extinct. But what if paradise could come back? Researchers at Colossal Biosciences are working in the lab and on the ground to get everything ready for the arrival of the dodo bird. Mauritius has changed over the last 4 centuries. A safe space must be created that will bolster the dodo's survival. The dodo is planned to be released in several controlled areas that are without predators. Certain plants will need to be grown for the dodos to eat. It will be a full habitat restoration with disease control and supplementary feeding.
If it all works out, which I hope it does, in the next few years, you and I could see real dodo birds.
T-Rex by 2050. The dodo bird has been extinct for less than 400 years. Dinosaurs have been gone for at least 66 million. Yet if scientists get their way, dodo birds could become T-Rex food by 2050. That's only another 26 years from now. The work is already being done, as is proof by the chicken that was recently transformed into a partial dino. Yes, it is already happening. Scientists genetically tweaked chicken embryos so that the embryos grew snouts instead of beaks. Dinosaur snouts, to be specific. It was some serious Dr. Frankenstein level biological manipulation, but wow, is it cool to see. You may have heard the anecdote before that chickens are the closest living relatives to tyrannosaurs. It's true in a roundabout kind of way.
Scientists are not entirely sure how it happened, only that it did.
Bird evolution, the twin bones in the snout of dinosaurs started growing longer and fused together to create a beak. Paleontologist Bart Anjan-Bular at the University of Chicago said the transition from snout to beak was one of the most radical changes. Otherwise, avians are still hugely similar to their dinosaur relatives. To create a Tyrannosaurus rex, scientists simply need to undo evolution. This starts with something simple like breeding chickens that have snouts instead of beaks. Then it's a matter of continuing to reverse smaller and smaller changes. All of this until a mutated chicken lays an egg, and from that egg comes a tiny dinosaur. The tiny part is what a lot of people don't realize about bringing T-Rexes back from extinction. They won't be the size of Godzilla, much to everyone's disappointment and relief. If scientists can work around the ethical roadblocks currently hampering their research, the first reborn dinosaurs will be fairly small. The first dinosaur will be a biological T-Rex, only the size standard chicken. Are you guys ready for that? Mammoth regeneration. Ben Lamb has become the new tech genius everyone is talking about. He could be the next big name like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. But only if he comes through on his promise of creating the first woolly mammoth by the year 2028. Ben is the CEO of Colossal Biosciences. Born in Texas, Ben has described himself as a serial entrepreneur. He has founded 4 major technology startups, but now all of his attention is focused on bringing back extinct beasts. He's not just talking about it though, he's doing it. Ben has investors like Paris Hilton and Thomas Tull. Thomas was the creator of the Jurassic Park franchise, someone who would obviously be interested in de-extinction. Ben has already raised tens of millions of dollars, and the project is well underway. He and his team are very confident that in the next 4 years, mammoths will once again roam the earth. Where do you think would be the best place to reintroduce mammoths into the wild? Take a guess. Go ahead and write it in the comments.
Or where would you want to see them?
The company has decided to go with Texas. Texas is where the company's labs are, so it's where the first mammoth in over 4,000 years will theoretically be born. Inside their lab, the work is already underway to create artificial wombs in which to grow woolly mammoth babies. But how do they do it? It's surprisingly simple. The woolly mammoth is 99.6% similar to the living Asian elephant. Chief Animal Officer Matt James said all they need to do is re-engineer the genome of the Asian elephant to reflect that of the extinct mammoth. Matt James is incredibly excited about the possibilities. In a recent interview, he talked about being the first person to take a selfie with a mammoth. Just think of the absurdity of such an amazing event. A person taking a selfie with a creature from the Ice Age. It could be you in only a few years if Ben, Matt, and the rest of the team pull off the impossible. The grasshopper. Sometimes creatures come back from extinction all on their own, but then I suppose they weren't extinct in the first place, were they? For the first time in 85 years, a spectacular species of grasshopper was spotted in Southeast Asia. Scientists in Myanmar and Thailand thought it was gone forever.
The first photographs were taken totally by accident. One photo was taken by someone on a family trip who spotted the grasshopper eating a citrus plant. The other photographer was studying sesame plants in Yan'an Guang when they saw a pair of the bugs mating. Both pictures were posted to a Facebook group, but nobody could identify the peculiar grasshopper. And for good reason.
The fascinating little grasshopper has been missing for so long that the last time somebody saw it was World War II. Naturally, there were no photos of the insect until now. Without photos, nobody was able to identify the strange bug. Nobody except insect expert Joseph Scadio. Joseph stumbled upon the photographs and was shocked. It might not seem like a big deal to the average person, but for a bug expert, someone who has dedicated their life to things that creep and crawl, it was a profound discovery. Joseph identified the bug as belonging to a family of critters known as gaudy grasshoppers because they are so colorful. The first gaudy grasshopper was discovered in August of 1937. A male and female specimen were preserved and transferred to the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia. Then, in 1964, the grasshopper was declared the only member of its genus, but then it was never seen again. Only those 2 specimens were captured in 1937, and now the 2 photographs taken randomly in late 2022. It was assumed the grasshopper had gone extinct, but clearly it was just hiding.
And now for number 10. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Moonshadow and Rebs and Blue for supporting this channel. I hope you have a wonderful day, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these.
The Tasmanian tiger.
Do you remember a few years ago when Elon Musk told everybody that humans would be living on Mars by 2025? Well, it's clearly not happening, as I'm sure you know. Elon Musk also claimed 1 million people will live on Mars by 2050, which seems unlikely, but what do you think? The reason I want to mention Elon Musk and his predictions is that Colossal Biosciences has been biting off a lot lately. They've already promised to bring back the dodo bird, the woolly mammoth, and now the Tasmanian tiger. Can they really do it?
The Tasmanian tiger has been extinct for 100 years. Out of all the other creatures that Ben Lamb and his company are trying to bring back from the grave, Tasmanian tigers are the freshest. Scientists were able to easily extract DNA and RNA from the desiccated skin and muscle tissue of a preserved corpse at the museum in Sweden. This was a lot easier than harvesting woolly mammoths frozen in permafrost. It was the difference between pulling fresh carrots out of the ground and buying them already cooked from the grocery store. The Tasmanian tiger is also known as the thylacine.
Take a look at the images of the extinct animal and tell me it isn't the most amazing marsupial/dog/cat creature thing that you've ever seen.
Sadly, it disappeared 2,000 years ago from its homeland in Australia, where it lived with all the other wacky animals. The thylacine survived only on the isolated island of Tasmania. It was the only marsupial apex predator on the planet. It played a crucial role in maintaining the natural order of Tasmania. When humans showed up, they noticed the peculiar animal and hunted it into extinction. The biggest issue for humans was that the coyote-sized marsupial allegedly feasted on their livestock. European settlers in the 1800s did not take kindly to anything that interfered with their goats and chickens and cows, so they made a concentrated effort to wipe them out. However, scientists don't think Tasmanian tigers were responsible. Tasmanian tigers were naturally shy, nocturnal beasts. The loss of European livestock likely had nothing to do with thylacines. Times were changing in the early 1900s, and people were becoming more aware of the dangers of extinction. Tasmanian tigers were given protected status, meaning it was illegal to hunt them. But it was too late. In 1936, the very last Tasmanian tiger died from exposure because it was kept in cruel and barbaric conditions at the Beaumaris Zoo in Hobart. I know it's super sad and depressing, but it's part of history. It's also something that has been happening since long before the European settlers ate all the dodo birds. Scientists believe Tasmanian tigers went extinct from Australia due to the arrival of the indigenous population. There is good news, though. I'm not going to leave you with doom and gloom. Andrew Pask from the University of Melbourne is hard at work trying to bring these amazing animals back from extinction. Andrew is the leader of the Thylacine Integrated Genetic Restoration Research Team, or TIGER. Andrew has already worked to resurrect a single Tasmanian tiger gene in the embryo of a mouse. This was back in 2005, marking the first time that anything like it had been done. Now Andrew is working closely with Ben Lamb from Colossal Biosciences. Together, there is real hope the Tasmanian tiger will live again. Colossal is currently working on a full-stage artificial womb to gestate and develop a live baby. The quagga. Currently galloping around on the plains of South Africa is a small population of animals most people have never heard of before. The animal is known as the quagga, sort of like a half zebra. The quagga has zebra stripes on the front half of its body, including its head, but the back half of its body is brown and furry. It's amazing that so few people have heard of this animal, considering it's the most impressive success story of bringing back an extinct species. Prior to a few years ago, nobody had seen a quagga since the 1800s. Scientists at Cape Town University successfully completed a breeding program that resurrected the zebra relatives. Story of the quagga is the same old song and dance, so I won't bog you down with the more morose details. Essentially, European settlers in South Africa in the 1800s caused the quagga to go extinct, with the last one being shot in 1883. To bring it back, scientists used living zebras. They went out into the wild and looked for zebras that most closely resemble quaggas. Amazingly, it worked. It took 5 generations and some very selective breeding. The team reduced the stripy patterns of the animals until only partially striped zebra/quagga hybrids remained. Scientists kept on breeding the creature until they were producing animals that were more quagga than zebra. It seems easy, and in a way, it was. This whole effort wasn't any more difficult than selectively breeding dogs to be a certain color. The only reason this was such a big success was that zebras and quaggas are so incredibly similar. It wasn't a huge stretch to backtrack the genes during the breeding program. Although I should mention that the living quaggas in South Africa right now are not 100% identical to their extinct friends. As explained by Professor Eric Harley, the creatures that have been bred are quagga-like animals. They might not have the same genetic adaptations as the extinct population. Still, the goal of the researchers is to create a large wild population of quaggas, totally separate from zebras, that will thrive for many years to come on the African plains. Australian dragons. Biotech firm Colossal Biosciences has their nose in the business of just about every extinct creature at this point in 2024. It's not a bad thing, especially since their work is so promising. The company isn't only trying to bring things back from extinction, they are also helping to prevent some animals from going the way of the dodo. The Texas-based firm is involved in a project right now to restore the Victorian grassland earless dragon. It was feared extinct until a specimen was found this year, much to the delight of conservationists. When the company heard about the discovery, they committed a massive amount of money to save the dragon. It isn't quite extinct, but it is considered critically endangered. The Victorian grassland earless dragon hadn't been seen since 1969. Scientists in Australia assumed it was as good as gone. It was only spotted by a sightseer who happened upon it totally by chance. Now the Melbourne Zoo is helping to build a quarantine breeding center to help boost the species' numbers. It's partnered with Colossal Biosciences as a part of their Lost Species initiative. The dragon isn't particularly big, it's not going to breathe fire, and it definitely isn't going to eat any brave knights. It's only a few inches long, pushed to extinction by foxes and feral cats. It wasn't necessarily humans this time, at least not on purpose. Though I admit that humans were the ones who introduced the foxes and cats to Australia in the first place. Neanderthal antibiotics. All of this talk about bringing back large animals, and I haven't even mentioned the attempt to de-extinct certain antibiotics. It's an effort that could save lives, but doesn't appear much in the media because, to be truthful, antibiotics just aren't as exciting as woolly mammoths. Scientists at the University of Pennsylvania are working hard to bring back tiny molecules with antibiotic properties from an unexpected source. The molecules come from extinct organisms, and by organisms, I mean our good friends the Neanderthals, who went extinct about 40,000 years ago. Scientists are calling it molecular de-extinction. But what's the point? And how do you even bring back something as small as a molecule from the void of extinction? The how involves artificial intelligence. Scientists at the university trained an AI model to discover which molecules could make effective antibiotics for modern humans. The algorithm identified extremely strong candidates from the DNA of Neanderthals. Next, it was really easy. Scientists went to their lab and created the molecules, then tested them on infected mice. Sure enough, the molecules fought off bacterial infections. These are molecules that were present in the bodies of Neanderthals, but no longer exist in the bodies of modern Homo sapiens. It's a lot easier to de-extinct one molecule than an entire body filled with billions of molecules. Now I'm going to scare you just a little bit. I know we're all still anxious after the disaster that was COVID, but according to the CDC, there is an even worse problem on the horizon. The Center for Disease Control has warned very recently that humanity is entering an era in which antibiotics are useless. We've created the disaster by overusing antibiotics. And viruses are smart. They mutate and change. Antibiotics are everywhere, used to treat humans, animals, and crops. Bacteria have been hard at work adapting to modern drugs, morphing into superbugs that are impervious to all available antibiotics. By the time you are finished watching this video, at least one person in the United States will have died from an infection that was previously treatable by antibiotics. Whoa, that is an intensely scary thought. Things that used to save lives are now no more effective than a placebo. A major UN report warned humanity that by 2050, 10 million people a year will die because antibiotics don't work anymore. Coming to the rescue is AI and, seriously, unexpectedly, dead cavemen. Molecular de-extinction could lead to a whole new generation of antibiotics that modern bacteria hasn't had a chance to adapt to yet. Millions of lives could be saved thanks to the blood of our ancient ancestors. The Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex has gone extinct twice already. In January of 2000, a falling tree ended the species in the most ridiculous way possible. Out of all the things that could have finally ended the Pyrenean ibex, it was a tree that toppled over. In 2003, it happened again. Only the extinction happened this time in a Spanish laboratory. The Pyrenean ibex had just been cloned. The newborn clone gasped for air, but there was something wrong. Tragically, the little clone didn't make it, and the Pyrenean ibex was extinct again, all after being resurrected for just a few seconds. The Pyrenean ibex just can't catch a break. The wild goat species was around for thousands of years before the invention of civilization. There are even pictures of them painted on European cave walls from 30,000 years ago. Although I should mention that there are a lot of different species of ibex. Wild mountain goats used to live across most of the world. There are cave paintings of them in Israel's Negev desert from 10,000 years ago, and in the south of France from 18,000 years ago. Scientists can't always tell which species is painted crudely by Stone Age fingers on cavern walls. The more reliable records of the Pyrenean ibex come from the Middle Ages. They were a popular creature to see in Spain, especially in the north. They grazed on the mountain slopes, leisurely munching grass and living very peacefully. But by 1910, only 40 of them were left. Their numbers plummeted significantly in the 1800s. By the time scientists realized they needed to save the Pyrenean ibex, it was too late. Cecilia was the last of her kind, crushed on January 6, 2000 by a falling tree. They were too late to save Cecilia, but they had a safety net in place. Shortly before her bizarre demise, scientists took skin biopsies from her ears. These were placed in cold storage. Then, after her death, the samples were thawed so that Cecilia could be cloned. Cloning is a tough gig. Scientists produced 500 cloned embryos, implanted 154 of them, and received one baby. Unfortunately, physical defects in the lungs caused the birth to fail. As of right now, the Pyrenean ibex is still extinct. Scientists don't think that cloning is the way to go because birth defects are too difficult to prevent. It's very sad because even with all the genetic tools, it's still proven too hard to bring back these goats. I don't know how colossal bioscience is going to bring back a mammoth. The Neanderthal. Scientists have already brought back molecules from Neanderthals to be used in the creation of new antibiotics. But what about the whole Neanderthal? Could scientists de-extinct an entire human species? Our Neanderthal brethren and sistren have been gone for roughly 30,000 years. Even though they are directly related to us, we still struggle to understand their history. It's known that humans existed alongside Neanderthals and bred with them. We shared food, fire, and our hearts. Neanderthals were creative, they made their own art, and they likely had similar cognitive and linguistic abilities as us. But then something awful happened. Humans began to outnumber Neanderthals. Soon enough, they were gone. Nobody knows if humans defeated them in a prehistoric war. Some scientists believe that humans and Neanderthals bred until only the human genome was left. What caused the Neanderthal extinction is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in anthropology. So let's bring them back and ask them. The Neanderthal Genome Project was a collaboration with scientists from top US companies and institutions in Germany. In 2010, they presented a draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome. Since then, incredible discoveries have been made. Data has answered questions about Neanderthal language and also revealed precisely which genes they passed on to humans through interbreeding. Bringing one back is a much stranger story. There are about 10 million differences between the Neanderthal genome and the human genome. The 10 million differences would need to be changed, and then the altered stem cell implanted inside a human female. Then a human woman would need to give birth to a Neanderthal baby. Who wants to volunteer to do that? It's such an unusual scientific thought that it's most likely never going to happen. The ethical concerns make it an impossibility. Even if, and it's a big if, women were lining up outside of a genetic laboratory to be implanted with a Stone Age embryo, it wouldn't be morally accepted. But what would, if it theoretically happened, a Neanderthal do in the modern world? The baby wouldn't be from the Stone Age. It would be a modern baby with Neanderthal features and genetics. Could it study at school? Could the baby become the first Neanderthal doctor? What do you think about the ethics and morality of this? Let me know in the comments below. Oregonian direwolves. A dog breeder in Oregon is trying to resurrect ancient direwolves through selective breeding. Her name is Lois Schwartz, and she has been at it for the last 30 years. The results of her work are outstanding. She has managed to create an entirely new dog that she named the American Alsatian. The adorable dog isn't exactly a dire wolf. Still, it's the closest thing to a dire wolf that someone today can have as a trusted companion. Lois's goal was to create an enormous dog similar in size to the Ice Age wolf, but way less frightening and a lot cuddlier. You may have heard of dire wolves before in fantasy, and especially in Game of Thrones, but the giant beasts were once very real animals. Unlike dragons and White Walkers, dire wolves roamed the chilly landscape of North America 125,000 years ago. When the world was a giant ice cube, they lived as far south as South America. There may have even been primitive human ancestors who tamed these creatures. Scientists call them Canis dirus, with the last of their kind going extinct about 10,000 years ago. Fossils of dire wolves were discovered in Indiana in the 1850s. Then more in the La Brea tar pits near downtown Los Angeles. Thanks to the large number of fossils, scientists have a very good idea of what dire wolves looked like. They were bigger than modern wolves, with larger heads, stronger jaws, and a longer body. Adult dire wolves could grow to over 6 feet long. Let's get back to Lois for a moment. In the 1980s, she was struck by an epiphany. Her new goal in life was to create a large dog that looks like a ferocious beast, but has the personality of a golden retriever. Thus began her work on the Dire Wolf Project. It isn't a terrible idea, and in fact, I kind of want one now. Who wouldn't want a prehistoric predator with the peaceful temperament of a lab? Though if I had the choice between a dire wolf and a chicken-sized T-Rex, I don't know, I think I'd be torn. Which one would you want? Lois started with an Alaskan Malamute. She added English Mastiffs for bulkier bones, Pyrenees dogs for more bulk, and Irish Wolfhounds for extra length and height. After 30 years, she is left with a shaggy gray dog that isn't quite a dire wolf, but is the next best thing. Lois has already sold over 3,000 puppies, with hundreds of people still on the waiting list. She and her daughter are the only breeders on the planet with these unique canines. York Groundsel. In 1991, a yellow flower that only grew in York, England, went extinct. Yes, this is all about a flower. But trust me, it's interesting. Plants are often overlooked when it comes to bringing things back from the dead, but plants are awesome. Just imagine if scientists could figure out a way to bring back some of the crazy trees and plants that existed 300 million years ago. Forget Jurassic Park. Scientists could create a botanical garden of only primordial plants. I'm talking jacked up Venus flytraps that can eat elephants, assuming those existed. The York groundsel isn't quite as exciting, but it was an ordinary yellow flower that died out because people were using weed killer too much. Now, for the first time in history, an urban plant has been brought back from extinction. The history of this flower is a little bizarre. It was found growing in a parking lot at a railway station in 1979. It was the first species of flower found to have evolved in Britain over the previous 50 years. However, as part of an urban plan to tidy up, the flower was denounced as a weed. By 1991, the people of York had sprayed it out of existence. Andrew Shaw from the Rare British Plants Nursery was determined to give the flower a second shot. With help from the government's conservation group called Natural England, a recovery program was initiated. Plant specialists gathered preserved seeds, planted them, and boom! Thousands of plants were sown into protected plots across York and along the network rail land. After 32 years of extinction, the York groundsel bloomed, and the city was awash in beautiful yellow flowers. Dinosaur fossils. It's one thing to slowly mutate a chicken until it's a tiny T-Rex, but what about growing a biologically correct dinosaur from a fossilized embryo? It's a possibility that could be even more reliable than making tiny Rex chickens. In 2010, paleontologists discovered a small cluster of dinosaur embryos in China. It was a huge deal because for the first time, scientists could study a dinosaur while in its embryonic stage. Researchers were shocked to find that dinosaurs underwent almost an identical pattern of bone growth as modern birds. The eggs added additional proof that birds are uncannily similar to dinosaurs. But the discoveries weren't done rolling in yet. That same year, a nesting site was discovered with 200 bones from juvenile plant eaters and fragmented eggshells, plus more embryos in various stages of development. These long-necked dinosaurs died about 190 million years ago. Scientists were able to reconstruct their growth stage by stage because of the sheer number of remains. But what about bringing these things back from the dead? We want dinosaur pets and we want them now, right? Cloning dinosaur DNA, like in Jurassic Park, is still impossible. There also isn't any dinosaur DNA to speak of. Although incredible fossils have been found, and lots of eggs since 2010, there isn't a piece of dino DNA anywhere. The most recent heart palpitation of excitement involved Chinese scientists scraping preserved nuclei from dinosaur femur cells. It was close, but they still didn't confirm DNA. Scientists have looked through fossilized cartilage, in embryos, and deep within bones. But without the physical DNA, there is no way that embryos can be cloned to create a biologically correct dinosaur. The auroch. The last auroch died in Poland in 1627. Today, a herd of modern aurochs can be found in the mountains of Spain. A group of extinct cattle was introduced to the wild using ancient genetics and domesticated cattle. At the end of the Ice Age, aurochs roamed Europe as giant cows. They weren't particularly woolly, nor were they vicious. They didn't have beaks or wings. They were just large cows that prehistoric people drew on cave walls. Though to be fair, their largeness should not be understated. They weighed over 2,500 pounds and had horns that floated 7 feet above the ground. The aurochs alive today are the largest herbivores in Europe. In 2013, the Dutch Taurus Foundation initiated a breeding program. Much like how the quagga was brought back to life by breeding zebras, the auroch was brought back using domestic cows. Ricardo Almazan, a local safari guide in Spain involved in the rewilding of the aurochs, said they are not 100% the same as the ancient ones. The living aurochs share about 90% of their ancestors' DNA. Over 600 of them have been bred since 2017. If you were a Stone Age person from 11,000 years ago, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Given enough time, if the breeding program is successful, the new aurochs will eventually become a species just as distinct as the original ones. Thanks for watching! If you could pick any extinct animal to bring back to life, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and stick around for more awesome content.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Caspian tiger. The Caspian tiger was among the world's largest big cats until it went extinct during the 1960s. It was once present throughout Turkey and much of Central Asia, including Iran, Iraq, and parts of northwestern China, according to Science Alert. Hunting, habitat loss, and food shortages wiped the species out a little over halfway through the 20th century. An early 2017 study published in the journal Biological Conservation proposed reintroducing the Caspian tiger by releasing specimens of its genetically similar relative, the Siberian tiger, into habitats formerly occupied by the Caspian subspecies. According to the authors, the Siberian tiger's phenotype proves adaptable to the arid conditions of the introduction site. It would likely take over a decade to bring the introduced population to a sustainable level in the Ili River Delta, which seems like the most appropriate place to attempt to revive the Caspian tiger. There, they could hunt wild boar, Bukhara deer, and roe deer. An introduced population of 40 tigers could reach 100 within 50 years of its release into the habitat, which would mark tremendous progress in keeping endangered tigers on the planet. But there are implications to the proposed endeavor, including the need to ensure that tigers and humans can coexist peacefully, as well as the requirement to restore prey populations before introducing tigers to the region, which would take up to 15 years. But scientists are seriously looking into it and starting to plan just in case. The dodo bird. Native to the island of Mauritius, the dodo was a large flightless bird that grew up to 3 feet tall and weighed as much as 40 pounds. It went extinct during the 1600s, following the arrival of humans and their non-native animal friends, such as dogs, cats, and rats. In a 2018 research paper, scientists suggested that it may be possible to revive the extinct dodo population by using the genes of its closest living relatives. The proposal came following the discovery of the overall genomic structure of dinosaurs, which may come in handy for bringing the dodo and several other extinct birds back to life. Birds are considered dinosaurs' closest living relatives, and more recently extinct species with genetically similar descendants may therefore stand a chance at revival. University of Kent scientists Darren Griffith and Rebecca O'Connor wrote in an article for The Conversation, "Nevertheless, and it is a long shot, it may be possible in the future to use Jurassic Park technology to help undo some of the harm that humans have caused." When asked which extinct animal would be the most fun to revive, ancient DNA expert and biologist Beth Shapiro told Smithsonian Magazine that the dodo was an ideal candidate because it's very silly looking and has several weird traits. On a more serious note, she explained that if the dodo were to be brought back, it could be restored to protected habitats on Mauritius, where people could go to observe dodos in their native habitat. Woolly mammoth. The last surviving population of woolly mammoths died out around 4,000 years ago on Wrangel Island off Siberia after centuries of inbreeding. By the time they went extinct, the creatures were sickly, weak, neurologically damaged, and far less fertile than they were during their heyday. Mammoths lived recently enough for scientists to harvest genetic material from their remains, raising questions about the possibility of de-extinction through the use of ancient DNA. Doing so is more complicated than it seems, especially because there were many mammoth species throughout the prehistoric world, and scientists are still trying to figure out where each of them belongs on the evolutionary family tree. There's also evidence that mammoths interbred, further blurring the lines between different species and giving single species a wide-ranging variety of characteristics. But that might make it easier to bring them back. This complicates the process of reviving mammoths, though, leaving scientists with tricky decisions about which traits they would hand-select to incorporate into mammoth offspring. Cloning mammoths isn't currently possible because doing so would require an intact and viable mammoth cell, which is unlikely to ever be found, according to biologist and ancient DNA expert Beth Shapiro. However, other scientists believe that it is possible and claim to actually be working on it right now, with DNA taken from intact frozen mammoths appearing in Siberia. The most probable method for bringing back mammoths would involve tweaking the DNA of its closest modern pachyderm relative, the Asian elephant, to more closely resemble the ancient creature. Best case scenario, whatever scientists created using this method would still be the product of guesswork. This new creature might lack genetic variations that mammoths possessed at certain times or in specific regions. Even if the genetically modified mammoth-like animal looked genuine, it would need to be able to survive in environments much different than those its ancestors lived in, since the world has changed a lot over 10,000 years. The most likely places would be the coldest, where the mammoths might be able to get enough food. And now for number 6. But first, be sure to subscribe if you are new here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Should we try to bring these animals back to life? If so, which ones? And why? Stellar sea cow. As a Sirenian, the stellar sea cow was most closely related to the dugong and manatees. Scientist George Wilhelm Steller first described it in 1741 during a voyage across the Bering Sea. While stranded on an island, Steller and his crew encountered colonies of these sea cows, who measured up to 25 feet long and weighed as much as 6 tons each. Within 27 years of Steller's discovery, the species was completely wiped out due to overhunting. After spending millions of years as an important participant of its marine ecosystem, the stellar sea cow was more or less wiped out in the blink of an eye. After surviving the Quaternary extinction event at the end of the Pleistocene epoch, stellar sea cows were found exclusively in frigid Arctic waters. Their rapid extinction helped bring awareness to the academic community that it is actually possible to entirely wipe out a marine species at human hands. Humanity's role in the animal's demise has inspired some scientists and experts, including science writer Carl Zimmer, to advocate for its revival. But researchers admittedly know very little about the species, leaving them to speculate regarding its behavior and biology and whether bringing it back to life is even an option. Labrador duck. The Labrador duck is believed to have become extinct during the late 19th century due to suspected human-related causes, despite its reputation for not tasting very good. The bird was already rare when European settlers arrived in North America. The last specimens were collected during the 1870s, and the last known sighting occurred in 1878 in Elmira, New York. Bird expert Brian Fox Ellis told the Star Gazette in late 2016 it is a sea duck that was almost exclusively found along the Atlantic coast between Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay and Labrador, and rarely found inland, so why one was found here, I'm not sure. Consequently, there is little information available about the Labrador duck, and there are only 55 preserved specimens in museums throughout the world. Scientists are admittedly unsure of what its breeding habits involved, and the species' extinction remains shrouded in mystery as well. Humans may have overhunted their eggs or driven them away from their natural habitat, or they may have fallen victim to the feather trade, but it's hard to say what happened for sure. Some bird enthusiasts believe that the Labrador duck never went fully extinct, and that there are some holdout individuals and populations waiting to be discovered. But in Ellis's words, this bird is gone, and it will take another heaven and another earth to create another species of its like. A January 2017 Science Alert article stated that scientists want to bring the Labrador duck back, but information on this alleged endeavor is scarce, leaving us to wonder whether reviving the species is truly part of any researcher's plans. Woolly rhinoceros. Woolly rhinos lived during the same ice age period as woolly mammoths, yet their remains are much rarer. Scientists also know far less about them, including their placement on the evolutionary timeline and information about their lifestyles and habits. The species went extinct roughly 14,000 years ago after roaming Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, for reasons that are not entirely clear. Researchers long speculated that human activity, such as overhunting, may have been a causal factor. Genetic abnormalities were also suspected of wiping the creature out, but recently published research in the journal Current Biology suggests that climate change played a role in the woolly rhino's disappearance. While the species' demise came some 16,000 years after humans arrived in its region, its extinction also coincides with a 2,000-year-long severe warming period known as the Bowling-Allerod Interstadial. During this time, ice sheets melted rapidly and sea levels rose by roughly 50 feet. Woolly rhinos may have been unable to cross the Bering Land Bridge that once connected modern-day Siberia to Alaska due to an inability to adapt to a tundra climate, leaving them with no choice but to perish. Only a few intact woolly rhino specimens have ever been discovered. In 2015, the complete carcass of a 7-month-old woolly rhino known as Sasha was found in a frozen Siberian riverbank, offering a glimmer of hope for the possibility of harvesting genetic material. Scientists started looking at the idea of being able to clone the extinct creature. As of now, the process seems wildly complicated and therefore unlikely to happen super soon, but it also hasn't been ruled out as impossible. Besides the fact that the woolly rhino has no known modern relatives appropriate for using in the de-extinction process, bringing non-existent animals back to life poses major ethical quandaries, leaving experts with questions of whether they should revive long-gone creatures, even if they can. Right now, our current rhino survival is hanging by a thread, so there is much debate as to whether it would be a good idea to bring back an extinct one. Irish elk. The Irish elk was one of the largest deer species that ever existed, with antlers measuring as much as 12 feet across. It roamed throughout Eurasia mostly during the Pleistocene, with the most recent known remains of the creature dating back to around 7,700 years ago. The animal's range was not restricted to Ireland. It received its name due to the remarkably well-preserved fossils that have been found in the country. Irish elk carcasses are increasingly turning up among melting permafrost in Siberia, offering scientists a potential opportunity to harvest their DNA and perhaps clone them or use other means to bring them back to life. It's believed that the species went extinct as a result of its antlers becoming unmanageably heavy and large. Another theory suggests that Irish elk were incapable of coping with a warming climate, posing the question of whether it would be wise to try to bring them back. With less land than ever for wild animals to roam and a rapidly changing climate, the planet may not be in the best condition for hosting a gigantic mammal's comeback. The sad reality is that if the Irish elk were to return to life today, it would most likely only be able to survive under human supervision at a zoo or in a lab. The moa. The idea of using Jurassic Park technology to revive extinct species has become increasingly realistic in recent years, especially when it comes to bringing back ancient birds. An extinct flightless bird endemic to New Zealand called the little bush moa is among the top candidates for revival. The little bush moa abruptly went extinct during the 13th century due to overhunting, but in early 2018, a team of Harvard University researchers announced that they successfully assembled a near-complete genome of the bird, offering hope of its eventual return to existence. Using groundbreaking DNA sequencing technology, they inserted the extinct moa's genetic material into an emu egg, then painstakingly assembled the 900 nucleotides into their correct positions. Throughout the study, researchers determined that the moa was related to the kiwi, ostrich, and emu birds. There were 9 moa species total, with the little bush moa being the smallest and most common among them. On average, the little bush moa was 4 feet tall and weighed around 66 pounds. While some scientists are all for trying to revive ancient birds, others do not believe it's a great idea. But the idea of de-extinction is not necessarily limited to bringing back extinct species. It could prove useful for saving modern creatures facing the threat of extinction. De-extinction could be useful for inspiring new science and could be beneficial for conservation if we ensure it doesn't reduce existing conservation resources, University of Queensland scientist Hugh Possingham said in a statement. However, in general, it is best if we focus on the many species that need our help now. Pyrenean ibex. The bucardo, or Pyrenean ibex, was a subspecies of Spanish ibex that was formally declared extinct in the year 2000, when the last known surviving female was found dead in Spain. The animal's demise came after a 200-year period of increased hunting in the region, and scientists' interest in reviving it came almost immediately following its extinction. In 2009, using genetic material harvested from frozen skin samples of the last surviving Pyrenean ibex, researcher and study author Jose Folch and his colleagues created clone embryos by inserting the deceased creature's DNA into goat eggs, which were emptied of their own material. These eggs were implanted in 208 specimens of Spanish ibex subspecies. 7 became pregnant, and just 1 carried to term. The youngster died from respiratory failure immediately after birth, which the researchers somewhat expected. Despite the creature's death, experts hailed the resurrection as a major scientific accomplishment, but they cautioned people to avoid becoming too hopeful about the process. The public should not leap to the conclusion that we are on the edge of cloning woolly mammoths or dinosaurs, scientist David Wilt told National Geographic. Even if such embryos could be constructed, there are no appropriate surrogate mothers for long-dead species. Thanks for watching! Would you like to learn more about extinct animals scientists are trying to bring back to life? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!